I'd like to read two poems about my uncles. I had two uncles. I've had a number of uncles, but because of the nature of my aunt. But two of them were extraordinarily meaningful to me. Um, One was the uncle of childhood, who's in this poem, and the other, or adolescence rather. The one I'll read later, is the uncle of childhood. This uncle I loved, dead now. And he was the guy who introduced me to a great deal, everything practically. My father died when I was very young, and so this uncle sort of, in a way, took that role for a while. And he was a wonderful man. I had a terrible experience with this poem. I'll tell you about it. I'll read the poem, and then I'll tell you the terrible experience. It's called Uncle. I remember the forehead born before Abraham and flecked with white paint, the two hands kneading each other at the sink. In the basement on Grand, he showed me his radio. Manila, Atlantis, the cities of the burning plains, the coupons in comic books, the ads of the air. Prophet of burned cars and broken fans, he taught the toilet the eternal, argued the Talmud under his nails. The long boats with the names of wind set sail in the sea of his blind eye. How could he come humpbacked in his crisp undershirt on the front porch in black Detroit, bringing in the milk, the newspaper, the bills, long past noon? His truck howls all night to Benton Harbor, Saginaw dog of the prairie. In the high work camps, the men break toward dawn. He sleeps under a mountain. Uncle, I call you again, Uncle. I come too late with a bottle of milk and a chipped cup of schnapps to loosen your fever, undo your arms and legs, so you can rise above Belle Isle and the Straits, your clear eye rid of our rooms forever, the glass of fat, the blue flame. Well, usually, you publish a poem in America, and it's like throwing a penny into the Pacific. But I got about 50 letters about this poem. I mean, I usually get about a letter per 10 poems. And I got about 50 letters for this poem. I said, well, what's coming on? And the letters were of extraordinary denseness. I mean, they were dumb, is what I'm saying. Like, a girl writes me from, Jaguar State College in, Arizona, and says, what is Uncle's problem? He's dead, It's an epic problem. The greatest one was, what is the relationship between the speaker and Uncle? That's really good. It's beautiful. So I wrote the magazine in which this appeared, Harper's Magazine. I said, why am I getting all these letters? I don't understand this. And they wrote back and they said, well, we offer a supplement for those who teach our magazine, and many junior colleges take them. And under your poem, your address was listed. And they said, if you have any problems, write the author. It's a lot of shit to take for $50. I learned a lot. To quit writing. But I went on anyway. Let's see, here's my other uncle. He's in my newest book, The Names of the Lost. It's a funny thing, I like this poem better, although it's not a poem of celebration, the way the other one is, I think. Not a man I loved, a man I feared. I don't know if I hated him, but I sure feared him. I'm much younger, I'm a kid in this poem, very small, 5, 6. There's a point in the poem where I say, sure, bitch. And the uncle's saying this. He's not saying this to me, because he doesn't even see me. I'm standing between him and his wife, and he's talking to her. I'm totally inconsequential. I'm trying to protect my aunt. It's called No One Remembers. A soft wind off the stones of the dead. I pass by, stop the car, and walk among none of my own, to say something useless for them, something that will calm me under the same old beaten sky, Something to let me go on with this day that began so badly alone in a motel 10 miles from where I was born. I say goodbye finally because nothing else is here. Because it is goodbye. Uncle Joe, big cigar, fist on the ear, nodding sure bitch and coming at me. You can't touch me now. And she's 1,000 miles from here. Hell, she may be dancing long past dawn across the river from Philly. It's morning there, too, even in Philly. It's morning on Lake St. Clair, where we never went fishing, along the Ohio River, the Detroit. Morning breaking on the New York Central Express, crashing through the tunnel, and the last gasp of steam before the entrance into hell or Baltimore. But it's not morning where you are, Joe, unless you come with me. I'm going to see her today. She'll cry like always when you raised your voice or your fist. She'll be robed near the window of the ward when I come in. No, she won't be dancing. It's my hand she'll take in hers and spread on her lap. It's me she'll feel slowly, finger by finger, like so many threads back to where the blood died and our lives met and went wrong, back to all she said she'd be. Woman, promise, sigh, dark hair in the mirror of a car window, all night on the way back from Georgia. You think because I was a boy, I didn't hear? You think because you had a pocket full of loose change, your feet on the desk, your own phone, a yellow car on credit, I didn't see you open your hands like a prayer and die into them, the way a child dies into a razor, black hair, into a tire iron, a chain? You think I didn't smell the sweat that rose from your bed, didn't know you on the stairs in the dark, grunting into a frightened girl? Because you could push me aside like a kitchen chair and hit where you wanted. You think I was a wren, a mourning dove surrendering the nest. The earth is asleep, Joe. It's rock, steel, ice. The earth doesn't care or forgive. No one remembers your eyes before they tired, the way you fought weeping. No one remembers how much it cost all night to drive to Chicago, how much to sleep all night in a car, to have it all except the money. No one remembers your hand, opened, warm and sweating on the back of my neck, when you first picked me up and said my name, Philip, and held the winter sun up for me to see outside the French windows of the old house on Pingree. No one remembers. This one is called New Season. Was written on the occasion, or about the occasion, a bit after my mother's turning 70, about a year ago. Year and a half ago. The Belle Isle Bridge is a bridge in Detroit. There's an island in the middle of the city, in the middle of the Detroit River, called Belle Isle, French name, beautiful island, in the middle of the Detroit River. There was, when I was a youngster, a race riot in Detroit during the Second World War. Very different from what came later in the late 60s. This was born of something indeed uglier. The horrible racism that is so much a part of us all. Many Southerners had come up to Detroit to work in the factories, perhaps 1 million. And the housing projects were built for them. And there was a struggle as to whether the housing projects would be white, each one at a time, whether they would be white or whether they would be black. Nobody considered that they might be mixed. And as long as they remained white, there was no trouble, but finally one was made black. And it precipitated a riot, a terrible riot. And that's referred to in this poem, which the Army finally came in and quelled. New Season. My son and I go walking in the garden. It is April 12th, Friday, 1974. Teddy points to the slender trunk of the plum and recalls the digging last fall through 3 feet of hardpan, and opens his palms in the brute light of noon, the heels glazed with callus, the long fingers thicker than mine and studded with silver rings. My mother is 70 today. He flicks 2 snails off a leaf and smashes them underfoot on the red brick path. Saturday, my wife stood here, her cheek cut by a scar of dirt on her bare shoulders, on the brown belly, damp and sour in the creases of her elbows. She held up a parsnip, squat, misshapen, a tooth pulled from the earth, and laughed her great white laugh. Teddy talks of the wars of the young. Larry V. and Ricky's brother in the movies, on Belmont, at McDonald's, ready to fight for nothing, hard, redded, or on air. Low riders, grease, what'd you say about my mama? Home late, one in the back seat, his fingers broken, eyes welling with pain, the eyes and jawbones swollen and rough. 70 today, the woman who took my hand and walked me past the corridor of willows to the dark pond where the one swan drifted. I start to tell him and stop the story of my 15th spring. That a sailor had thrown a black baby off the Belle Isle Bridge was the first lie we heard, and the city was at war for real. We would waken the next morning to find Sherman tanks at the curb and soldiers camped on the lawns. D'Amata said he was going downtown, bury a hatchet in a nigger's head. Women took coffee and milk to the soldiers, and it was one long block party till the trucks and tanks loaded up and stumbled off. No one saw D'Amata for a week, and when I did, he was slow, head down, his right arm blooming in a great white bandage. He said nothing. On mornings I rise early, I watch my son in the bathroom, shirtless, thick-armed and hard, working with brush and comb at his full blonde head that suddenly curled like mine and won't come straight. 7 years passed before Deladobian told me how 3 white girls from the shop sat on her on the Woodward streetcar so the gangs couldn't find her and pull her off like they did the black janitor and beat an eye blind. She would never forget, she said, and her old face glows before me in shame and terror. Tonight, after dinner, after the long halting call to my mother, I'll come out here to the yard rinsed in moonlight that blurs it all. She will not become the small openings in my brain again through which the wind rages, though she was the ocean that ebbed in my blood, the storm clouds that battered my lungs, though I hide in the crotch of the orange tree and weep where the future grows like a scar, she will not come again in the brilliant day. My cat, Nellie, 15 now, follows me, safe in the dark from mockingbird and jay, her fur frost-tipped in the pure air. And together we hear the wounding of the rose, the willow on fire, to the dark pond where the one swan drifted. The woman is 70 now. The willow is burning. The rhododendrons shrivel like paper under water. All the small secret mouths are feeding on the green heart of the plum. This poem's called The Angels of Detroit. 1. I could hear them in fever, hovering in the closet or falling from the mirror. I could see them in the first dreams of my dead. Perfume of scorched clothes, she spits back at the spitting iron. She slaps it with a round pink palm, and the angels sigh from the shadowy valleys of my shirts. 2. I wore angels. They saved me in the streets where the towers hung above, suspended on breath. They saved me from the pale woman who smoothed the breasts of chickens, or the red-armed one who sold bread in the shop of knives. While I leaned on the cold stones of summer and tried to cry and tried to change, They sent me a robed mother, or a promise in the dark hall. In the black river at midnight, they said, go back. They sent snow to cover the steps, to crown the teeth of garbage and bless the deaths of old cars, snow falling on our upturned faces in the great church, the presses choiring in the roof of night. Part 3. From Toledo by bus, from Flat Rock on siphoned gas, from the iron country on a dare, for one night. Stosh says, nigger boys crying in the shithouse. All of us far from Mama and getting farther. 4. At the end of Mud Road, in the false dawn of the slag heap, the hut of the Angel Bernard. His brothers are factories and bowling teams. His mother is the power to blight. His father moves in all men like a threat, a closing of hands, an unkept promise to return. We talk for years. Everything we say comes to nothing. We drink bad beer and never lie. From his bed he pulls fists of palms and scatters them like snow. Children are guilty, he whispers, and the soft mouth puffs like a wound. He wants it all tonight. The long, hard arms of a black woman. He wants tenderness. He wants the power to die in the chalice of God's tears. True dawn through the soaped window. The plastic storm wrap swallows wind. 37 Chevy hoodless. Black burst lung of inner tube. Pot metal trees buckling under sheets. He cries to sleep. Part 5. In a toilet on Joy Road, Long Eddie on alto. The yellows of his eyes brown on pot. The brown centers burned like washed gold. Never knew the tune. 16 years old, drummer had to prod him to music. So much sorrow and hatred. So much tenderness he could taste coming up from the rich earth. Little clown, caught all alone, arm in a mailbox, never did nothing right, except tell the cops to suck and wave them off like flies. Part 6. After midnight of the final shift, with all our prayers unanswered, we gave up. Unvisored pale knot of West Virginia, mountain rock and Black Valley earth, ungloved yellow potato, dried tubers, yoked bean, frozen cedars of weariness, we gave up. The cranes slip overhead. The ore pours from the earth to us. Poor earth, somewhere unseamed. If you listen quiet to Lonnie next to you or hopping sugar, you can hear it piping in pity. Don't matter what rare breath puddles in fire on the foundry floor. The toilets overflow, the rats dance, the maggots have it, the worms of money crack like whips, and among the angels we lie down. The last part, 7. Red-haired, black-skinned Cuban woman. Wait all night in the parking lot, doze and talk to no one of home. The panels of the black chapel flame. The glass melts or races with stars. Nothing lasts forever. Sunup shatters the yellowed windows of the old Dodge. She meets us, coatless, in magenta, an early flower late blooming in the fenced white waste, bare arms open. This is a poem from my second book, Not This Pig, which I published in 1968. It takes place in Barcelona, where I lived, in the middle 60s, and the only thing one need know to understand it is that the same kind of mythology exists in Spain that exists in the United States to depict the nature of the Southerner. The Southerner in Spain, the Andalusian, is largely today the industrial worker of the North. And he bears the reputation for being lazy, stupid, shiftless, an animal. And of course it is on his labor that modern Spain is built. The midget. In this cafe, Durruti the Unnamable plotted the burning of the Bishop of Zaragoza, or so the story goes. Now it's a hot tourist spot in season. But in mid-December, the bar is lined with factory workers and day laborers as gray as cement. The place smells of cement and of urine, and no one takes off his coat or sits down to his sherry. The Queen's drink is thin and dry as benzene. It is Sunday, late, and each man drinks alone, seriously. Down the bar, a midget sings to himself, sings of how from the starving South he came a boy to this terrible Barcelona and ate. Not all the songs are for himself. He steps back from the bar, his pot belly pushed out and wrapped intricately in a great somber cummerbund, and tells the world who is big, big in the heart, and big down here, big where it really counts. Now he comes over to me, and it is for me he sings. Does he want money? I try to buy him off with a drink, a bored smile, but again I hear of his power, of how the Germans, Dutch, English, all the world's babies come to him, and how on the fields of skin he struts. Here, he says to me, feel this and you'll believe. In a voice suddenly thin and adolescent, I tell him I believe. Feel this, feel this. I turn away from him, but he turns with me, and the room freezes except for us two. I can smell the bitterness of his sweat, and from the cracked corners of his eyes see the tears start down their worn courses. I say, no, no more. He tugs at my sleeve, hulking now, and too big for his little feet. He tugs and will not let go, and the others along the bar won't turn or interfere or leave their drinks. He gets my hand, first my forefinger like a carrot in his fist, and then with the other hand my wrist, and at last I can't shake him off or defend myself. He sits in my lap and sings of Americas, of those who never returned and those who never left. The smell of anise has turned his breath to a child's breath, but his cheeks, stiff and peeling, have started to die. They have turned along the bar to behold me on the raised throne of a torn plastic bar stool, blank and drunk and half asleep. One by one, with the old curses thrown down, they pay up and go out. And though the place is still except for the new rumbling of the morning catching fire, no one hears or no one cares that I sing to this late-born freak of the old world, swelling my lap. I sing lullaby and sing. And finally, two recent poems that come out of the experience of going to post-Franco Spain, which I did in the spring of 1977. A poem called Francisco, I'll Bring You Red Carnations. A short explanation. Durruti, Ferrer Guardia, and Francisco Ascaso are three great anarchists buried in the old cemetery behind the fortress of Montjuic, just south of Barcelona. A difunto is a dead person. The Llobregat is a river that empties into the Mediterranean just south of Barcelona. Francisco, I'll bring you red carnations. Here in the great cemetery behind the fortress of Barcelona, I have come once more to see the graves of my fallen. Two ancient picnickers direct us down the hill. Durruti, says the man, I was on his side. The woman hushes him. All the way down, this is a city of the dead. 871,251 difuntos. The poor packed in tenements a dozen high, the rich in splendid homes or temples. So nothing has changed, except for the single unswerving fact they are all dead. Here is the Plaza of San Jaime, here the Rambla of San Pedro. So every death still has a mailing address. But since this is Spain, the mail never comes, or comes too late to be of use. Between the cemetery and the Protestant burial ground, we find the three stones all in a row. Ferrer Guardia, B. Durruti, F. Ascaso. The names written with marking pens and a few A's and tributes to the Phi and Sayente. For two, there are floral displays. But Ascaso faces eternity with only a stone. Maybe as it should be. He was a stone and a blade, the first grinding and sharpening the latter. Half his 36 years were spent in prisons or on the run. And yet, in that last photograph taken an hour before he died, he stands in a dark suit, smoking, a rifle slung behind his shoulder, and glances sideways at the camera, half smiling. It is July 20, 1936, and before the darkness falls, a darkness will have fallen on him. While the streets are echoing with victory and revolution, Francisco Ascaso will take up the hammered little blade of his spirit and enter for the last time the republics of death. I remember his words to a frightened comrade who questioned the wisdom of attack. We have gathered here to die, but we don't have to die with dogs, so go. 41 years ago, and now the city stretches as far as the eye can see. Huge cement columns like nails pounded into the once green meadows of the Llobregat. Your Barcelona is gone, the old town swallowed in industrial filth and the burning mists of gasoline. Only the police remain, armed and arrogant, smiling masters of the boulevards. The police and your dream of the city of God, where every man and every woman gives and receives the gifts of work and care. And that dream goes on in spite of slums, in spite of death clouds, the roar of trucks, the harbor staining the mother sea. It goes on in spite of all that mocks it. We have it here, growing in our hearts, as your comrade said. And when we give it up with our last breaths, someone will gasp it home to their lives. Francisco, stone, knife blade, single soldiers still on the run down the darkest street of all. We will be back across an ocean and a continent to bring you red carnations, to celebrate the unbroken promise of your life that once was frail and flesh. This is called Hear Me. I watch the filthy light seep through the cracked shutters and stain the walls of this third-rate hotel.
and I rise and go downstairs to walk among the bodies of the lost men who have come to die in Barcelona. They are so small, each a tiny pale planet, whirring slowly toward the burning each of us will embrace. Open-mouthed, they sigh in the damp morning. Bread will not save them. Holy bread, common bread, conquered bread. No bread will save them. Wine they have. Their lips and chins are darkened, and that didn't save them. If God cared, he would send an old crone to waken each of them and whisper that in work is salvation. And there would be great laughter, for they have become work. That one, who is still only a boy, is first the ringing of a hammer on steel. If you put your ear to his chest, you will hear the music of salvation breaking his heart. The old one, wiping this morning from his forehead with a soiled cap, was born in a house with a well. He ate the well, and then the four walls and the fireless nights that crushed his hopes. He wants a cigarette. His work is eating. And before dusk has climbed the walls of this plaza, he will have eaten the rage of all our lungs. The others, why have they come from all the small places to this place, if not to find the crone hidden in an English raincoat? The crone who will not say, "Conquer your bread," because I have spit out that lie. Who will not say, "Take this wine," because I took it and I am drunk. Who will not say, "Work," because I know that never worked. You, sitting alone, put your ear to my chest, or take this damp head, motherless from birth, and smother me against the hardened body of all you've lost. And hear me praying to die in Barcelona.
Let me read a kind of violent poem. I talk about the golden light of Tarragona. Tarragona is the old Roman capital of Spain, a city about 90 miles south of Barcelona, which for centuries was famous for a particular kind of light, which was very soft and enticing, and made up really of it's wine country and a light soil, and the soil would be blown into the air, and it would sort of glimmer in the sun. And of course, it isn't there anymore. It's got smog there now. That's what that refers to. L.A., you know where that is. Ask the roses. Snow fell forward forever. I heard the trees counting their breaths, the laughter of the icicles, the rivers turning to stone. What became of the sea's dream to become spirit and range the sky? What became of the astronomy of the gopher, tunneling under the lettuce, and the onion that died like a saint from the head down? What became of the wooden heart of the crow who marked our fields, of two codfish, end to end, on a blue plate? In the gay parlors of Barcelona, a widow bought an arm and leg. Someone else bought all the names. At sea, I buy a cloud and steer it landward into a pile of cars. I buy a mountain oak and feed it cocaine until the leaves gag. I read the wolf, the oath of office, until he sheds his coat, bites off his forepaws, and howls for the grave. In front of everyone, I take out my money and count it, stacking the 50s, the 20s, the 10s, the house of peace, the mansion of wisdom, the tenement of beauty and the martial arts, survival and torture. We drink to the health of the dollar. Let my people go, say the coins, herded into the black purse and headed for Germany. No one is going anywhere. We've all come into our own, and we're staying. There are tall, reedy weeds by the fence. The fallen oranges in my neighbor's yard blacken and spread like shotgun wounds. Down south in L.A., they are pouring milk back to the sewers. Has anyone asked the cows? Has anyone told the sunset it will be on TV, or the child that her breast filled with plastic will sell fried chicken? Has anyone told the sea it must count its tears and explain each one? Has anyone told the blood how long it must crust the sheets? Has anyone asked the roses if they love bees who are basically communists and worship the female? Has anyone fallen on his knees and begged the dawn to reconsider? Perhaps it is too late now. With the golden light of Tarragona darkening into lead, I want to take a vow of silence. Every word is a young mouse, growing in my throat, stretching his paws, trying out his pink nails. As light enters the morning glory, I feel the heart of a tree swell and grow into mine. As light falls through the tunnel of branches that lead back the way I came, I rise from this grave and go. My aunt and my mother sit again, as in the first dreams of home, crying with love for each other, exchanging words they will forget. Later, there will be silence. Houses will die around them. My aunt will waken in a motel outside Fort Dix without a name. In the movies, my mother will see the future and run weeping along the black staircases studded with huge, breathless stars. The old sun will darken like the spots on her hands. The light will pass early, and she will go on wiping at the air as at a window, wondering, is it there? All around her, Los Angeles goes on moaning and blooming, and I wait for the bus that never comes, or punch the time card after the clock is stopped. Let the leaves falling singly in my hair get up and join the tree. Let the unread books open into the nests of barn swallows, or turn to twigs and long grass yellowing in the summer winds. Let the smell of the egg mate with the rose, and the voice of elm cry out at dusk, a cat who will no longer hunt, calling for food, my old cat full of foolishness and hungers. Shall we dye her blue, call her California, and teach her how to turn, how to walk on stage, how to hold the mouse in her paws? Every evening we show her television, blackening the screen when the lions drink in the crowded stream. The ibex, the small dogs, the monkeys, the gazelles lie down in shade. The vulture sings in the baobab tree. The pen that told the truth melted on the stove. The ink that held in its veins the bones of the eel let go. They became dirt, metals that are earth and can't fly, or must return to spring water, bitter in a tin cup. A man shelling peas sleeps under the quarter moon. Anyone who laughs out of turn must eat flies. At dusk, no one dares. If a woman passed me now, she would yell at her dog, snap the leash, and try to look old. If she cast her eyes to the ground, I would smell it and shake her head until her hair caught fire. Smelling myself, I think of old clothes, schoolrooms the rain entered and killed, of a leather purse lost at sea, of a mule bleeding along the whipped flanks, a wind passing through a burned hand, the black embers flaking, of air a dog wouldn't breathe. I am space alone, unfilled, waiting day after day for two people to be together, or only one who could sigh and be still.
It's called Cry for Nothing. It's in 3 sections. Make the stream on the hurt faces of stones, up the hillside into the black house of firs. Say your name to stump, to silence, to the sudden wings of the air. Say your name to yourself. It doesn't matter, because it all comes back. A red leaf prick in your crotch, burr balls tapping at your ankles with their me, the fresh weed tongue lashing at your cheek to make you cry for nothing. Part 2. Motor roar of bad clutch, passing goats, drunk trucks, cement haulers, night men coming home on foot, dawn men going out and steaming in anger at the cold. Mark sleeps next to me, his blonde woman hair tangling the gear shift. Behind, the little ones breathing in their bad socks, farting and gnashing at the first sex streams. And the mama, my alone woman, rolling in the limbo of sleep. I'm awake and staring for the first breaks of light between the prison towers of hell slums north of Barcelona and the dark tear pools left in the streets. Part 3. He let her drive, and she crashed her papa's front porch. Man asked for her license, and she 14. The evening gathering above the wooden roofs, a heavy darkness spreading from car lights. Time to go. Small kids near the kitchen asking, and the oven flashing its magic. Time to go if you got a place to go. Man let Luther, and he called home. Her mother says she gone early and the baby be coming by now, and where is he? He with me, pushing the old black Lincoln back down the drive, watching the radiator bear its muddy wounds. Luther rolling his sleeves up high and cupping his long hillbilly fingers around a flaring match. Luther cocking his tattoo against the black rain and the rain of black luck. Luther pushing on toward the jeweled service station of free cokes and credit, there ahead in a heaven of blue falling, and nothing going to make him cry for nothing. Waking an Angel, which is really a poem about marriage more than it is about the nature of angels. The husband of this marriage speaks in the poem. Waking an Angel. Sparrows quarreled outside our window. Roses swelled. The cherry boughs burst into fire. And it was spring in the middle of a bad winter. We've been good, she said. We have avoided the fields, tended our private affairs without complaint, and this is surely our reward. I wasn't so sure. There were hard gray spots on the underbelly of the ringtail coon that died in the garbage. There was sand as white as powdered glass overflowing the vessel of the hyacinth. There was sand on my own tongue when I awakened at 1 or 2 in the dark, my nostrils inflamed, my voice crying out for her. She wouldn't move. I put my cold hands on her hips and rocked her gently. Oh, 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 was all she said through set, dry lips. She was slipping away from me. I was afraid to look at what dense wings lifted her out of my bedroom and my one life, her voice still trailing. Oh, 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 like a raiment of victory.
It's called Peace. Our words go slowly out, and the sun burns them before they can speak. It is though the earth were tired of our talk and wanted peace, an end to promises, perhaps an end to us. And we merely turn to a window and gaze upon the farmer and his horse slowly plowing the field they plowed the day before. The sun has risen, and within an hour it will begin to drop. And in the lengthening shadows a known cold will waken and step toward us. You will touch my shoulder just once, and I will close the window and turn to see your eyes bright and alive, your mouth holding a smile as best it can. There is still light upon your broad forehead I have seen bathed in sweat, light upon cheeks and chin, and now that light is going too. No one said it would be easy.
This is a poem from my first book, On the Edge. The poem was written probably around 1960. It's called For Fran. She packs the flower beds with leaves, rags, dampened papers, ties with twine the lemon tree, but winter carves its features on the uprooted stem. I see the true vein in her neck, and where the smaller ones have broken, bluing the skin, and where the dark cold lines of weariness have eaten out to the winding of the bone. On the hard ground where Adam strayed, where nothing but his wants remain, what do we do to those we need, to those whose need of us endures even the knowledge of what we are? I turn to her whose future bears the promise of the appalling heir, my living wife, Frances Levine, mother of Theodore, John, and Mark. Out of whatever we have been, we will make something for the dark.
The life ahead. I wakened, still a child, and dressed myself slowly for the life ahead. It came at 2 after lunch. The class quieted, and the teacher's eyes clouded and closed. I could smell our coats on their hooks. I could smell my own uncut hair, the hair of a dog, and when I looked down below to the dark streets awash with oil, a small boy, alone and lost, wandered across the playground. He climbed the fence and made it across the avenue, past the closed candy store, and down the street that led to hell. There was a river in Detroit, and if you crossed it, you were in another country. But something always called me back, a woman who had no use for me, or a brother who did, or the pure white aura of steel, before the forge came down with a groan like the seas, and we stood back waiting for one more leaf of a truck spring, thick-arched leaf of earth. Something called me back to this life, and I came home to wander the schoolyard again as a lost boy, and find above or below the world was here and now, drowning in oil, second by second borrowed from the clock. My oldest son is a sculptor, and he lives in New York. He's about 25. He is 25. You ought to know your oldest son's age. Yeah, he's 25, sure. And this poem is about the first time he and I met, not as parent and child, but as two men who live on this earth in New York, which is his town, not mine. And on this occasion, he squired me around, took care of me. And I'm sure this is a relationship that will go on. Eventually, he will be wheeling me. And it will end with his lowering me. He's a wonderful guy, really, a wonderful man. I say boy, but he's not a boy, he's a man. In the beginning, I say he believes I'm dying. I'm not dying. Oh, I mean, I'm dying the way the rest of us are dying. You're dying, but I'm not dying hopefully any faster. But my son was under the impression that I was dying very quickly because one of my dear friends told him that. That's what you need. You need friends. And when I told him it wasn't true, he didn't believe me, and he thought I was being, very kind. Also, I had done an atypical thing, in a sense. I'd crossed the country to see him, and he thought, of course, I was coming. He said, "Well, where are you reading? You're reading at the Y?" I said, "No, schmuck, I came to see you." And he said, "Oh, he must be dying." He's got to be dying. He wouldn't have come. That tight son of a bitch wouldn't have spent $400 to see his kid. So there was a lot of evidence that I was dying. 25 years of living together. My son and I, in a coffee house at 3 a.m., and he believes I'm dying. Outside, the wind moves along the streets of New York City, picking up abandoned scraps of newspapers and tiny messages of hope no one hears. He's dressed in worn corduroy pants and shirts over shirts, and his hands are stained as mine once were with glue, ink, paint. A brown stocking cap hides the thick blonde hair so unlike mine. For 40 minutes he's tried not to cry. How are his brothers? I tell them I don't know. They have grown away from me. We are Americans and never touch on this stunned earth where a boy sees his life fly past through a car window. His mother, she is deaf and works in the earth for days, hearing the dirt pray and guiding the worm to its feast. Why do I have to die? Why do I have to sit before him, no longer his father, only a man? Because the given must be taken. Because we hunger before we eat. Because each small spark must turn to darkness. As we said when we were kids and knew the names of everything, just because. I reach across the table and take his left hand in mine. I have no blessing. I can tell him how I found the plum blossom before I was 30. How once in a rooming house in Alicante, a man younger than I, an Argentine I barely understood, sat by me through the night while my boy Teddy cried out for help, and how when he slept at last, my friend wept with thanks in the cold light. I can tell him that his hand, sweating in mine, can raise the Lord God of stones, bring down the republic of lies, and hold a spoon. Instead, I say it's late, and he pays, and leads me back through the empty streets to the Earl Hotel, where the room sours with the mold of old Bibles dumped down the air shaft. In my coat, I stand alone in the dark, waiting for something. A flash of light, a song, a remembered sweetness from all the lives I've lost. Next door, the TV babbles on, and I give up and sway toward the bed in a last chant before dawn. Dark head. Wakened suddenly by my own voice, I know I've said your name, and you stir, your breath as sweet as milk, and give me first a hand to hold, and then your head to cradle. How we came to be together from the distant ends of warring stars. How we gave first our hearts, and then the rest I can't say. The night is ending. The dawn I once prayed for is cracking along the eastern rim of hills, and the first light floods this filthy valley of the Ohio River. Here and there a house puts on a light, and someone wakens to a life as strong as the smell of urine in the broken cellars of the houses I walk by each day. Once more you are sleeping in my arms, the arms of a man you don't know yet trust. I'm alone and more, awake to the life that tears us apart, content to see the day come on flaming window after window. Today I shall be gone, and you will be alone again. Today or tomorrow I shall be fire, then ashes, then a hint of something animal moving out of the corners of the wind, and then at last I shall be nothing, not even the echo of someone's voice. And then I'll be ourselves once more, this world, opening in each eye and damp fist for those who would have her. Toward home. The you in the poem is my wife. The years are turning toward home, and I am entering the forest of no trees, the winds that bring neither heat or rain. No bigger than the stone you kicked out of your way, still I am all there is of someone who lived beside the great sea and listened to its prayers. Do you remember how once you took my hand and led me to a white room I'd never seen before? You held me close and said my name again and again, although the name was wrong, the name of someone I never was. Do you recall that night? I was awake even before the light had moved from between the leafless trees and entered the dusty window and touched your face open beside me. How long ago was it? I slipped out from between the clean sheets and stood naked and cold on the bare wood floor, sorting my clothes from yours, needing to return to a life that was no more me than any other life, to a room I'd paid for and so could say was mine, to a blue work shirt softened with use and bearing a name. In the mirror I saw a body, mine, thickened with years of work, but still soft and shadowed in those small valleys where so few hands had strayed, a body you said had grown precious in its deformities. Even then, combing my tangled hair with the hardened fingers with which I stained the world, I inhaled the perfume of our sweat and thought, no one will ever shape my face so perfectly or hold so much of me in her eyes and name it all. And no one ever has. All those years ago, I walked in the frozen January air, chanting my happiness to no one, along the curving road that led toward town, that led toward manhood, toward you again and again, toward age, madness, this coming to be the salt the sea would crust over the eyelids of my closed face, toward the pebble washed ashore, the moon that turned its face away, toward everything for which there were no names, no open hands, no voice to even try. This is a poem I never read before. I thought, hell, I'll try. It's very close to prose at times, and I like that. I wanted to be a novelist once, and I tried, for many years, but I didn't have the patience. I had patient man, but I didn't have the temperament really. And I stay up night after night, and you can do that with poems. You can stay up 2 or 3 nights, but try doing that with a novel, After about 3 months, I got to finish this thing before it finishes me. So I wrote 2 ghastly novels, and I don't know. Short stories didn't do it for me. I love, great short stories. Maybe I couldn't write them. Chekhov, or Catherine Ann Porter. But I didn't want to write short stories. I wanted to write big, thick novels that would change America. The way big, thick novels had changed me, like USA and War and Peace. It's called Asking. Once in the beginning, on the last Sunday of a lost August, I sat on the Canadian shore of Lake Huron and watched the dark clouds go over, knowing this was the end of summer. There was a girl beside me, but we barely knew each other. And so we sat in our separate thoughts, or I did anyway. I saw how it would be, summer after summer, working toward a few days like this, when I came flushed with strength and money, my hands scarred and hardened, my shoulders and arms thick, and maybe I would find a girl, or maybe I'd get drunk and fight, or growing older, just get drunk and sit alone staring into a glass the way my uncles did. When I felt the girl's hand on the back of my neck, I shuddered, the way you do when a cool wind passes over you. And she misunderstood and pulled her hand away. I took her hand in mine and said something about having drifted off and how odd it was to know a season had ended at one moment and I had turned toward winter, maybe a lifetime of winters. Then I thought of her, working week after week in the office of a small contractor she said she hated, and going home to the father she said she hated, and the mother who went on about marriage and was she ever going to get out, and she just barely 22. Almost 30 years ago. She and I never saw each other after we got back to Detroit in the smoky light of early evening. I let her out a block from her house and said I'd call her, but knew I wouldn't, knowing what I did about her life and how she needed someone I wasn't. I went back to my room and sat in the dark, wondering, how can I get out? I knew there must be millions of us, alone and frightened, feeling the sudden chill of winter, of time gathering and falling like a shadow across our lives, wondering what was the answer. Only a boy, still alone, still solemn, turning in the darkness toward manhood, turning as the years turned imperceptibly, petal by petal closing for the night, the question still unanswered, that question never to be asked again. It's called A Late Answer. It takes place on a little island called Texel, T-E-X-E-L, which is off the north coast of Holland, and is owned by a friend of mine. Not the island. It's owned by Holland. I mean, there's a little house on the island that a friend of mine owns, and now and then it's almost deserted. It's a bird sanctuary. And now and then when my wife and I have felt in need of repair, which as the years goes on is more often, we go out there. And she looks at the birds, and I get drunk, and somehow this repairs it. It's called A Late Answer. Beyond that stand of firs was a small clearing where the woods ran out of breath or the winds beat them back. No one was born there, and no one would be. But you could bury a lonely man there or an animal you didn't want out for flies to eat. As we passed under the trees, you were cold and took my hand and felt a shiver pass through me, but you didn't let go. When you spoke at last, it was to ask after my thoughts. But just then we broke into light so unexpected, I had to close my eyes and saw the fire swimming there, and had such a vision of the end of my life, the trees turning to great flowers of flame, and the field ringed with sword-bearing angels. I could say nothing, but held on to your hand and you to mine, both in the dream and in that bare place where the North Sea winds lashed our faces with sudden spurts of rain. Now, on the other side of the world, years later, I know the ant came here believing he would rule, and he waits for the wren to fall. The grass waits, blowing its breath into this morning that rises darkly on wet winds. Somewhere the sea saves its tears for the rising tide. Somewhere we'll leave the world, weighing no more than when we came, and the answer will be the same. Your hand in mine, mine in yours, in that clearing where the angels come toward us, without laughter, without tears.